Hey friends, tonight we plunge into the sun-baked, sandal-slapping chaos of ancient Greece, where surviving a single day in Athens feels like juggling olives while dodging philosophers and pushy merchants. Picture yourself stumbling from a time portal, your linen tunic flapping, your feet kicking up dust in a crowded marketplace, the air thick with olive oil, sweat, and shouting hawkers. This is no toga party, it is a gritty world where you might not last a day without tripping over a stray goat or flubbing a deal in the agora. Trust me, you would probably beg for a nap by noon and curse the lack of air conditioning. So, before you settle in, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly value what I share here. Leave a comment with your city and the current time. I am curious who is braving this Greek grind with me. Now, dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let us ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the heart of Athens' agora, circa 430 BCE, where cobblestone paths wind past marble stalls under a blazing sun, their awnings flapping in a warm breeze. The air is heavy with the scent of olives, fish, and baking bread, and the marketplace hums with life. Merchants hawk pottery, women barter for figs, and philosophers argue under a colonnade. You wear a rough linen tunic, already sticky with sweat, your sandals slipping on dust as you dodge a cart piled with amphorae. The Athenians' faces are sun-browned, some veiled against the glare, others gesturing wildly in deals gone sour, and you notice a man with a clay tablet, scribbling prices with a stylus. You are here to navigate the chaotic Athenian marketplace, a bustling hub where survival demands sharp wits and thicker skin, and you realize a single misstep could cost your purse or pride, heart quickening as you brace against the agora's clamor. You weave through the crowd, sidestepping a stray dog gnawing a fishbone, and pause at a stall where a vendor named Cleon, his beard flecked with flour, offers fresh bread loaves stacked on a wooden table. He hands you a crusty piece, grinning, "Taste, traveler, and name your price." You bite the dense bread, its grit catching in your teeth, and note his sharp eyes, sizing you up for a bargain or a blunder. You are struck by the intensity. The agora is not just a market, but a battlefield, where every deal tests your cunning, and a bad trade could leave you hungry by dusk. You are tempted to haggle, but a nearby shout over a spilled wine jar pulls your focus, and you wonder how anyone endures this chaotic hubbub, your pulse rising as you clutch the bread, wary of pickpockets or a merchant's sly tongue. Here is the principal historical fact. The agora in ancient Athens, flourishing in the 5th century BCE, was the central marketplace and civic hub where trade, politics, and social life intertwined, shaping the city's democratic and economic life, as evidenced by archaeological excavations and ancient texts like Thucydides' histories. You observe Cleon now, his hands dusting flour as he haggles with a customer. Located near the Acropolis, the agora hosted stalls for goods, pottery, food, textiles, and served as a forum for public debates, trials, and festivals. Merchants, citizens, and slaves mingled, with barter and coin-based trade driving Athens' economy, though sharp dealing and disputes were common. The agora's vibrancy reflected Athens' democratic ethos, but also its competitive edge, a crucible for survival. You consider Cleon's bread, recognizing its role in daily trade, and you begin to admire the Athenians' tenacity, navigating chaos with little more than wit and crust. You strive to blend in, but your grimace at the bread's grit elicits a chuckle from a passing vendor, who tosses you a small fig, saying, "Eat to sweeten your deal." You chew the sticky fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a clay pendant shaped like an owl, perhaps a market charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian markets, some vendors wore owl pendants, clay or bronze charms depicting Athena's owl, believed to sharpen wits or ensure fair trade, a practice found in agora artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine the vendor's pendant, pondering whether it holds superstition or savvy, and it offers a quaint insight into how merchants sought luck in the agora's fray, turning clay into talismans of cunning. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Cleon calls you to help stack loaves, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe sweat from your brow. You begin to sense the agora's rhythm, a frenetic pulse of trade and trickery amid sun and dust. You overhear a woman lament a swindled drachma lost to a sly potter, prompting hushed murmurs from shoppers. You catch Cleon's sly glance, his hands swift as he pockets coins, and it dawns on you the marketplace not only feeds bodies but tests spirits, with every deal a dance of trust and guile. You recall the Subura's torchlit lanes, where merchants hawked wares, and recognize this agora as a louder stage, where chaos shapes daily survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did the Athenian agora primarily foster democratic engagement or economic competition? Some scholars assert it was a democratic space, enabling civic discourse, as seen in epigraphic evidence. Others argue it prioritized competition, with trade driving social divides, a perspective in economic histories. You observe Cleon's sharp barter, wondering if it is democracy or drachmy, and lean toward competition. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a stall's purpose over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the agora, to an extent. You learn to stack loaves carefully, endure the tunic's sticky cling, and keep your coin pouch close to avoid thieves. You pass the fig's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a stall, earning a flutter, and refocus on Cleon, who shows you how to display bread for quick sales. You are fumbling, your hands clumsy, but his brisk nod steadies you, heart quickening. You begin to grasp why the agora's chaos defined ancient Greece not mere trade but a crucible, testing Athenians' wits in every shouted deal. You glance at a passing shopper, his cough cutting through the din, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. The agora's trials are just beginning, but you are hooked on its bustling struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the agora's dust fading, the stars faint above the thatched roofs. Your heart quickens, the vendor's owl pendant vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by candlelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the swindled drachma, the weaver's thin cloth, and all the Athenians navigating chaos in those crowded stalls. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another market's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, dodging deals without spilling coins or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the agora's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You slip away from the dust-choked agora of Athens, the sharp tang of Cleon's gritty bread still lingering on your tongue like a Subura market stale crust after a hectic day. Your linen tunic is damp with marketplace sweat, streaked with flour from stacking loaves, your sandals worn from dodging carts. The vendor's owl pendant, a clay charm for cunning trade, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your chaotic navigation through Athens' bustling hub. The air shifts from olive oil and shouts to a crisp, pine-scented breeze as you arrive in Sparta, its rugged hills looming under a dawn sky. It is 430 BCE, and Sparta's militaristic life demands unrelenting discipline, far from Athens' chatter. You are drawn to a training ground where young warriors endure grueling drills. Welcome to a world of Spartan military drills, where you face the punishing regimen of a warrior society. Fair warning, it is tougher than a Subura gladiator's bout, and surviving these drills will test your stamina more than an agora's haggling. You stand at the edge of a dusty plain outside Sparta, where rocky slopes frame a field churned by marching feet, the air thick with sweat, leather, and the metallic tang of polished bronze. Shouts echo as youths spar with wooden swords, their tunics patched and sweat soaked under a rising sun. You are surrounded by Spartans' lean boys in training, stern instructors barking orders, and helots hauling water, their faces grim under servitude's weight. Your tunic clings, your sandals sink into dust as you join a group led by a trainer named Leonidas, his scarred arms wielding a spear, his voice a whip that brooks no weakness. You notice his bronze greaves, gleaming but heavy, and his piercing gaze, sizing you up as a novice unfit for Sparta's ranks. You are here to endure grueling military drills, a relentless test of strength and discipline that shapes Spartan life. And you realize failure here means shame or worse, heart quickening as you brace for the trainer's command. You line up with the youths, the sun's heat prickling your skin, as Leonidas orders a sprint across the plain, his spear jabbing to spur you on. A helot named Theron, his shoulders bowed, offers you a clay cup of watered wine, his voice low, "Drink, traveler," to brace your legs. You sip the sour brew, its bite sharper than Cleon's bread, and note Theron's calloused hands, trembling from carrying burdens for Sparta's warriors. You are struck by the brutality. Drills here are not mere exercise but a forge, hammering boys into soldiers with no room for weakness, where exhaustion could mark you as unfit. You are tempted to protest the pace, but a youth's grunt as he stumbles pulls your focus, and you wonder how anyone endures this punishing regimen, your pulse racing as you stagger through the dust, gasping for breath under Leonidas' glare. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Sparta, from approximately the 7th to 4th century BCE, military training, known as the agora, was a rigorous system that shaped boys into disciplined warriors, central to Sparta's militaristic society, as evidenced by ancient texts like Xenophon's Constitution of the Lacedaemonians and archaeological findings. You observe Leonidas now, his spear raised as he drills the youths. From age 7, Spartan boys entered the agora, enduring physical training, combat drills, and survival tests to instill strength, obedience, and loyalty. Harsh conditions, minimal food, thin clothing, and constant discipline prepared them for war, with Sparta's survival depending on its hoplite army. The agora fostered a warrior elite but demanded sacrifice, with failure leading to exclusion or disgrace. You consider the youth's strained faces, recognizing the drill's relentless purpose, and you begin to admire their endurance, facing Sparta's forge with little more than grit and wine. You strive to blend in, but your stumble during the sprint elicits a curt grunt from Theron, who tosses you a small olive, murmuring, "Eat to steady your heart." You chew the bitter fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a leather cord around his neck, strung with a small bronze bead shaped like a shield, perhaps a training charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Spartan training camps, some helots wore shield beads, bronze, or bone charms shaped like shields or spears believed to protect trainees or appease war gods, a practice found in Laconian artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Theron's bead, pondering whether it holds superstition or servitude, and it offers a quaint insight into how even helots sought meaning in Sparta's grueling world, turning bronze into talismans of survival. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Leonidas barks for you to join a shield wall drill, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe dust from your eyes. You begin to sense the plain's rhythm, a punishing pulse of sweat and steel amid Sparta's glare. You overhear a youth mutter about a failed trainee shamed for fleeing a drill, prompting hushed murmurs from his peers. You catch Leonidas' stern glance, his voice cutting through the din, and it dawns on you drills not only forge bodies but bind fates, with failure threading through every clash or faltering step. You recall Athens' chaotic agora, where wits won deals, and recognize this plain as a fiercer stage, where discipline shapes Spartan survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Sparta's agora primarily build military prowess or enforce social control? Some scholars assert it honed warriors, ensuring Sparta's dominance, as seen in battle accounts. Others argue it controlled society, suppressing individuality to maintain order, a perspective in social histories. You observe Leonidas' spear, wondering if it is prowess or power, and lean toward control. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a drill's purpose over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the plain, to an extent. You learn to hold the shield steady, endure the tunic's sweaty cling, and keep your stance firm to avoid a trainer's jab. You pass the olive's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a rock, earning a flutter, and refocus on Leonidas, who shows you how to lock shields without wavering. You are fumbling, your arms aching, but his sharp nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why military drills defined ancient Sparta, not mere training, but a crucible, testing youth's resolve in every grueling clash. You glance at a passing helot, his cough cutting through the dust, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Sparta's trials deepen, but you are hooked on its warrior struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the plains dust fading, the stars faint above the thatched roofs. Your heart quickens, Theron's shield bead vivid in your mind. The amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by candlelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the failed trainee, Cleon's agora, and all the Spartans enduring drills in those rugged plains. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another training's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating rigor without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room, Sparta's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You stagger away from Sparta's dusty training plain, the aching burn of Leonidas' grueling drills still throbbing in your limbs like a Subura wrestler's bruises after a punishing bout. Your linen tunic is sodden with sweat, streaked with dust from shield wall clashes, your sandals worn from sprinting across rocky ground. Theron's shield bead, a bronze charm for warrior grit, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your endurance through Spartan military rigor. The air shifts from pine and bronze to a warm, olive-scented breeze as you return to Athens, its sun-baked streets bustling under a midday glow. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life demands sustenance, but food is sparse and strange. You are drawn to a modest oikos, where a family prepares a meager meal. Welcome to a world of Greek diet dilemmas, where you struggle with the limited and unfamiliar foods of ancient Athens. Fair warning, it is blander than a Subura tavern's gruel, and surviving on this fare will test your palate more than a Spartan sprint. You step into the oikos, its mud brick walls cool under a tiled roof, the air thick with olive oil, barley, and the faint tang of fermenting wine from a clay amphora. A small courtyard hums with activity. Women knead dough, a child grinds grain, and a hearth smolders with embers under a bronze pot. You are surrounded by the household men in short tunics, women in draped peploi, and slaves stirring pots, their faces glistening with sweat. Your tunic clings, your sandals scuff the dirt floor as you settle near the hearth, drawn by a woman named Lysandra, her hands floured, shaping flatbreads on a hot stone. You notice her simple chiton, patched at the hem, and her weary smile, hinting at the effort to stretch sparse ingredients. You are here to struggle with the limited ancient Greek diet, a daily challenge of scarce and repetitive foods, and you realize hunger is a constant shadow, heart quickening as you brace for a meal that barely satisfies. You sit by the hearth, the fire's faint heat warming your aching legs, as Lysandra ladles a thin barley porridge into a clay bowl, its steam carrying a whiff of herbs. She offers it to you, her voice gentle, "Eat, traveler," to quiet your stomach. You sip the watery gruel, its blandness a stark contrast to Theron's sour wine, and note her careful portions, ensuring all receive a share. You are struck by the scarcity. Food here is not pleasure but necessity, with barley, olives, and figs forming a repetitive diet that leaves you craving variety or fullness. You are tempted to ask about meat, but a child's grumble over a small olive pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure this dietary monotony, your stomach rumbling as you clutch the bowl, seeking sustenance that feels more like a chore than a meal. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Greece, particularly Athens in the 5th century BCE, the diet was limited and heavily reliant on barley, olives, figs, and wine, with meat and fish being rare for most, posing nutritional challenges, as evidenced by ancient texts like Aristophanes' comedies and archaeological food remains. You observe Lysandra now, her hands shaping another flatbread with practiced care. The average Athenian consumed barley porridge maza, bread, olives, and figs, supplemented by lentils, onions, and garlic, with wine diluted for daily drink. Meat, usually goat or pork, was reserved for festivals or the wealthy, and fish was costly for inland dwellers. Malnutrition, especially among the poor, was common, with diets lacking protein and variety, a challenge later worsened by crises like the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE. You consider the porridge's thin gruel, recognizing its meager nourishment, and you begin to admire the Athenians' resilience, surviving on scraps with little more than grit and oil. You strive to blend in, but your grimace at the gruel elicits a soft chuckle from a slave, who tosses you a dried fig, murmuring, "Chew to sweeten the meal." You bite the chewy fruit, grateful, and notice she wears a linen cord around her wrist, knotted with a barley grain, perhaps a kitchen charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian households, some cooks or slaves wore grain cords, linen or leather straps knotted with barley or olive pits, believed to ensure plentiful meals or appease harvest gods, a practice found in domestic artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine the slave's cord, pondering whether it holds superstition or sentiment, and it offers a quaint insight into how kitchens sought abundance, turning grains into talismans against hunger's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Lysandra calls you to help knead dough, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to scratch your sweaty neck. You begin to sense the oikos rhythm, a weary pulse of labor and rationing amid Athens' bustle. You overhear a man lament a spoiled amphora of wine, prompting hushed murmurs from the family. You catch Lysandra's careful glance, her hands portioning bread sparingly, and it dawns on you dietary limits not only strain bodies but bind fates, with scarcity threading through every olive or shared bowl. You recall Sparta's grueling drills, where discipline forged warriors, and recognize this oikos as a quieter stage, where limited food shapes daily survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did the ancient Greek diet primarily reflect environmental constraints or social inequalities? Some scholars assert that poor soil and climate limited crops, as seen in agricultural studies. Others argue that social hierarchies, reserving meat and fish for elites, worsened scarcity for the poor, a perspective in social histories. You observe Lysandra's sparse gruel, wondering if it is land or lords, and lean toward inequalities. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a harvest yield over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the oikos, to an extent. You learn to knead dough evenly, endure the tunic's sticky cling, and keep your bowl steady to avoid spills. You pass the fig's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a rafter, earning a flutter, and refocus on Lysandra, who shows you how to shape flatbreads without tearing them. You are fumbling, your hands clumsy, but her patient nod steadies you, heart quickening. You begin to grasp why diet dilemmas defined ancient Greece, not mere meals, but a daily trial, testing Athenians' resolve in every bland bite. You glance at a passing child, his cough cutting through the courtyard's hum, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its hungry struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the oikos oil fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, the slave's grain cord vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the spoiled amphora, Theron's drills, and all the Athenians scraping by on barley in those sunlit homes. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another meal's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating hunger without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the oikos pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from Lysandra's sunlit oikos, the bland aftertaste of her barley porridge still clinging to your tongue like a Subura tavern's watery gruel after a lean meal. Your linen tunic is sticky with kitchen sweat, dusted with flour from kneading flatbreads, your sandals scuffed from the courtyard's dirt floor. The slave's grain cord, knotted to bless meager meals, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your struggle with Athens' limited diet. The air shifts from olive oil and herbs to a heavier, earthier reek as you wander through Athens' narrow streets, their cobblestones slick under a midday sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life hides a grimmer truth. Sanitation is scarce, and cleanliness a luxury. You are drawn to a public fountain, where citizens grapple with the harsh reality of hygiene. Welcome to a world of hygiene's harsh reality. where you face the lack of proper sanitation in daily life. Fair warning, it is grimier than a Subura alley's muck, and navigating this filthy world will test your stomach more than a Spartan drill. You approach the public fountain, its marble basin chipped and mossy, the air thick with damp stone, sweat, and a faint stench of refuse drifting from nearby alleys. Water trickles from a bronze spout, pooling in a basin where women rinse cloths and men splash their faces. You are surrounded by Athenian citizens in short tunics, slaves hauling buckets, and children splashing in puddles, their skin sun-browned but grimy. Your tunic clings, your sandals slip on wet cobbles as you edge toward the fountain, drawn by a woman named Chloe, her chitin damp, scrubbing a clay pot with a rag. You notice her calloused hands, raw from washing, and her wary glance, hinting at the effort to stay clean in a city without sewers. You are here to face the lack of proper sanitation, a daily ordeal where dirt and disease lurk in every corner, and you realize cleanliness is a fleeting hope, heart-quickening as you brace against the fountain's sour odor. You lean over the basin, the water's cool touch a brief relief from the heat, as Chloe hands you a clay jug to fill, her voice curt, "Wash, traveler, but sparingly." You rinse your hands, wincing at the water's cloudy grit, and note her scrubbing cloth, frayed and stained from endless use. You are struck by the challenge. Hygiene here is not a habit, but a battle, with no running water, soap, or waste systems to ease the task. You are tempted to ask about bathing, but a man's grumble over a clogged drain nearby pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure this filthy reality, your skin itching as you clutch the jug, seeking cleanliness that feels more like a chore than a comfort. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Greece, particularly Athens in the 5th century BCE, sanitation was rudimentary, with limited public water systems, no sewers, and minimal hygiene practices, leading to widespread health risks, as evidenced by archaeological urban studies and texts like Hippocrates' medical writings. You observe Chloe now, her rag scraping the pot with dogged effort. Athens relied on public fountains and wells for water, often contaminated by nearby refuse or latrines, with no piped sewage system to manage waste. Bathing was infrequent, using basins or rivers, and soap was unknown, with olive oil or ash as crude cleansers. Disease, like dysentery or skin infections, thrived in these conditions, worsened by crises like the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE, when overcrowding spread illness. You consider the fountain's murky water, recognizing its hidden threat, and you begin to admire the Athenians' persistence, scrubbing grime with little more than rags and grit. You strive to blend in, but your wince at the water's grit elicits a faint smirk from a slave, who tosses you a small olive pit, murmuring, "Rub for luck's shine." You scrub the pit against your palm, grateful, and notice he wears a linen cord around his neck, tied with a small seashell, perhaps a hygiene charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian households, some slaves or citizens wore shell cords, linen straps with seashells or pebbles believed to purify water or ward off skin ailments, a practice found in domestic artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine the slave's cord, pondering whether it holds superstition or solace, and it offers a quaint insight into how Athenians sought cleanliness, turning shells into talismans against filth's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Chloe calls you to help rinse cloths, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to scratch your grimy arms. You begin to sense the fountain's rhythm, a weary pulse of scrubbing and splashing amid Athens' bustle. You overhear a woman lament a fevered child sickened by bad water, prompting hushed murmurs from bystanders. You catch Chloe's tense glance, her hands wringing the cloth, and it dawns on you poor sanitation not only dirties bodies but endangers lives, with disease threading through every splash or shared jug. You recall Lyssandra's sparse oikos, where gruel strained sustenance, and recognize this fountain as a grimmer stage, where hygiene's harsh reality deepens daily survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did ancient Greek sanitation challenges primarily stem from technological limits or social neglect? Some scholars assert that limited engineering lacking pipes or sewers drove the crisis, as seen in urban excavations. Others argue that social neglect, prioritizing civic grandeur over public health, worsened conditions, a perspective in social histories. You observe Chloe's cloudy water, wondering if it is tools or temples, and lean toward technology. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a fountain's design over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the fountain, to an extent. You learn to rinse cloths carefully, endure the tunic's sweaty itch, and keep your jug steady to avoid spills. You pass the olive pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on the basin's rim, earning a flutter, and refocus on Chloe, who shows you how to scrub pots without wasting water. You are fumbling, your hands clumsy, but her brisk nod steadies you, heart quickening. You begin to grasp why hygiene's reality defined ancient Greece not mere dirt, but a relentless trial, testing Athenians' resolve in every gritty rinse. You glance at a passing child, his cough cutting through the street's din, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its filthy struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the fountain's reek fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, the slave shell cord vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the fevered child, Lyssandra's gruel, and all the Athenians battling filth in those crowded streets. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another hygiene's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating grime without spilling water or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the fountain's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from Athens' grimy public fountain, the sour grit of Chloe's cloudy water still lingering on your hands like a Subura alley's muck after a rainy day. Your linen tunic is damp with fountain spray, streaked with dust from rinsing cloths, your sandals slick from wet cobbles. The slave shell cord, a seashell charm to purify water, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your struggle with hygiene's harsh reality. The air shifts from refuse and damp to a warm, incense-laden breeze as you approach a temple precinct, its marble columns gleaming under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life revolves around the gods, whose worship demands complex and constant devotion. You are drawn to the temple of Athena, where citizens participate in intricate religious rituals. Welcome to a world of the gods demanding worship, where you navigate the elaborate rites of ancient Greek religion. Fair warning, it is more intricate than a Subura priest's sermon, and surviving these rituals will test your patience more than a murky fountain's rinse. You step into the temple precinct, its marble courtyard bustling with activity, the air thick with myrrh, roasted barley, and the faint bleat of sacrificial goats tethered nearby. Statues of Athena loom, their bronze eyes glinting, while altars smoke with offerings under a cloudless sky. You are surrounded by Athenians' priests in white robes, women bearing garlands, and citizens chanting hymns, their faces solemn yet sun-browned. Your tunic clings, your sandals scuff the polished stone as you join a procession led by a priestess named Talia, her chiton draped with saffron, carrying a bronze censer trailing incense. You notice her steady hands, pouring libations onto an altar, and her serene gaze, masking the weight of divine expectations. You are here to participate in complex religious rituals, a demanding duty that binds Athens to its gods, and you realize a single misstep could anger the divine, heart quickening as you brace for the procession's solemn rhythm. You follow the procession, the censer's smoke stinging your eyes, as Talia leads a chant to Athena, her voice rising over the crowd's murmurs, offering prayers for the city's protection. A citizen named Kleidos, his tunic stained with wine, hands you a clay cup of diluted wine for a libation, his voice low, "Pour, traveler, to please the goddess." You trickle the wine onto the altar, its splash mingling with barley tossed by others, and note Kleitos' trembling fingers, perhaps from fear of divine wrath or festival fatigue. You are struck by the intensity. Worship here is not mere faith, but a high-stakes obligation, with rituals, sacrifices, and offerings consuming time and resources, where errors could invite calamity. You are tempted to ask about Athena's favor, but a goat's bleat as it's led to slaughter pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure these demanding rites, your pulse racing as you clutch the cup, wary of spilling sacred wine. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Greece, particularly Athens in the 5th century BCE, religion was central to daily life, with complex rituals, sacrifices, and festivals dedicated to gods like Athena, shaping social and civic identity, as evidenced by ancient texts like Herodotus' histories and archaeological temple remains. You observe Talia now, her censers swinging with practiced grace. Athenians worshipped the pantheon led by Zeus, Athena, and Apollo, performing libations, animal sacrifices, and festivals like the Panathenaea to honor them. Temples, such as Athena's Parthenon, were civic hubs, with priests and priestesses overseeing rites that ensured divine favor for harvests, wars, or health. Neglecting rituals risked divine anger, believed to cause plagues or defeats, as seen during the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE. You consider the altars smoking barley, recognizing its sacred weight, and you begin to admire the Athenians' devotion, appeasing gods with little more than wine and grit. You strive to blend in, but your clumsy pour elicits a soft tisque from a citizen, who tosses you a small olive branch, murmuring, "Hold for Athena's grace." You grasp the twig, grateful, and notice he wears a bronze pin shaped like a laurel leaf, perhaps a ritual charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian festivals, some worshippers wore laurel pins, bronze or clay badges with leaf or owl motifs believed to secure divine favor or mark ritual purity, a practice found in temple artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine the citizen's pin, pondering whether it holds piety or pride, and it offers a quaint insight into how Athenians sought divine approval, turning bronze into talismans of devotion. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Talia calls you to help scatter barley, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe incense from your eyes. You begin to sense the precinct's rhythm, a solemn pulse of chant and offering amid Athens' heat. You overhear a woman lament a failed harvest blamed on neglected rites, prompting hushed murmurs from the crowd. You catch Talia's serene glance, her censer unwavering, and it dawns on you worship not only binds souls but burdens lives, with divine demands threading through every libation or sacrificial bleat. You recall Chloe's filthy fountain, where grime tested survival, and recognize this temple as a loftier stage, where demanding rituals shape Athenian life. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did ancient Greek religious rituals primarily foster civic unity or reinforce social hierarchies? Some scholars assert they unified Athens, strengthening community through shared worship, as seen in festival inscriptions. Others argue they reinforced hierarchies, with elites controlling priesthoods and offerings, a perspective in social histories. You observe Talia's saffron robe, wondering if it is unity or privilege, and lean toward hierarchy. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a rite's purpose over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the precinct, to an extent. You learn to scatter barley carefully, endure the tunic's sticky cling, and keep your cup steady to avoid spills. You pass the olive branch to a scrawny sparrow perched on a column, earning a flutter, and refocus on Talia, who shows you how to offer barley without wasting it. You are fumbling, your hands shaky, but her calm nod steadies you, heart quickening. You begin to grasp why the gods' worship defined ancient Greece, not mere devotion, but a complex duty, testing Athenians' resolve in every sacred act. You glance at a passing citizen, his cough cutting through the chant's hum, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its divine struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the temple's incense fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, the citizen's laurel pin vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the failed harvest, Chloe's grime, and all the Athenians offering to gods in those marble precincts. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another ritual's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating piety without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room. The temple's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You slip away from the temple of Athena's incense-filled precinct, the solemn weight of Talia's sacred chants still ringing in your ears like a Subura shrine's fading bells after a long ritual. Your linen tunic is damp with sweat from the temple's heat, scented with myrrh from scattered barley, your sandals scuffed from marble steps. The citizen's laurel pin, a bronze charm for divine favor, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your participation in the gods' demanding worship. The air shifts from incense and sacrifice to a warm, dust-laden breeze as you wander through Athens' bustling streets, their cobblestones alive with chatter under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' intellectual life pulses with philosophical debates, as relentless as its religious rites. You are drawn to a shaded stoa in the agora, where philosophers engage in fierce arguments. Welcome to a world of philosophers' endless debates, where you grapple with Athens' intense intellectual sparring. Fair warning, it is trickier than a Subura rhetorician's spiel, and surviving these verbal duels will test your wits more than a temple's solemn rites. You step into the stoa, its marble columns casting cool shadows, the air thick with olive oil, papyrus, and the faint hum of raised voices disputing truth and virtue. Wooden benches line the space, cluttered with scrolls and wax tablets, while a crowd gathers, gesturing animatedly. You are surrounded by Athenians, philosophers in draped hemationes, students scribbling notes, and citizens heckling or nodding, their faces flushed with debate's fervor. Your tunic clings, your sandals crunch on scattered pebbles as you edge toward a group led by a philosopher named Sokrates, his beard gray, his voice sharp as he questions a young man's definition of justice. You notice Sokrates' bare feet, calloused from pacing, and his piercing gaze, probing for flaws in every answer. You are here to grapple with Athens' intense philosophical debates, a mental gauntlet that demands quick thinking and endurance, and you realize a single misstep could mark you as a fool, heart quickening as you brace for Sokrates' probing questions. You settle on a bench, the stone cool against your legs, as Sokrates turns to you, his voice calm yet cutting, asking, "What is courage, traveler?" A student named Ariston, his hemation neat, offers you a clay cup of watered wine, his voice low, "Drink, friend," to sharpen your tongue. You sip the tart brew, its bite sharper than Chloe's fountain water, and note Ariston's eager glance, scribbling your response on a tablet. You are struck by the pressure. Debate here is not mere talk, but a crucible, forging minds through relentless questioning, where a weak answer could earn scorn or worse, a Socratic dismantling. You are tempted to dodge the question, but a citizen's heckle at a faltering speaker pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure these verbal duels, your mind racing as you clutch the cup, seeking clarity that feels as elusive as Athena's favor. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, philosophy flourished as a central intellectual pursuit, with figures like Socrates engaging in public debates that shaped Western thought, as evidenced by ancient texts like Plato's dialogues and archaeological agora remains. You observe Socrates now, his hands gesturing as he dissects a reply. The Agora stoas hosted philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Anaxagoras, who used dialectic question and answer debates to explore ethics, justice, and knowledge. These discussions, open to citizens and students, challenged assumptions and fostered critical thinking, influencing Athens' democratic culture. Yet, such debates could provoke hostility, as seen in Socrates' trial for impiety in 399 BCE, reflecting tensions during the Peloponnesian War 431-404 BC. You consider Socrates' probing stare, recognizing its intellectual weight, and you begin to admire the Athenians' tenacity, sparring with ideas despite risk and ridicule. You strive to blend in, but your stammered reply on courage elicits a wry smile from Ariston, who tosses you a small olive, murmuring, "Chew to clear your thoughts." You bite the bitter fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a clay pendant shaped like an owl's eye, perhaps a wisdom charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian philosophical circles, some students wore owl eye pendants, clay or bronze charms depicting an owl's eye believed to sharpen insight or honor Athena's wisdom, a practice found in agora artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Ariston's pendant, pondering whether it holds superstition or scholarly pride, and it offers a quaint insight into how Athenians sought clarity in debate, turning clay into talismans of intellect. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Sokrates calls you to answer again, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe sweat from your brow. You begin to sense the stoa's rhythm, a dizzying pulse of question and counterpoint amid Athens' heat. You overhear a citizen lament a ruined speaker mocked for weak logic, prompting hushed chuckles from the crowd. You catch Sokrates' relentless glance, his voice slicing through your reply, and it dawns on you debate not only sharpens minds, but exposes flaws, with scrutiny threading through every word or wavering pause. You recall Talia's temple rites, where offerings bound the divine, and recognize this stoa as a fiercer stage, where endless debates shape Athenian life. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian philosophical debates primarily advance intellectual freedom or reinforce elite dominance? Some scholars assert they fostered freedom, empowering citizens through discourse, as seen in Plato's texts. Others argue they reinforced dominance, with educated elites controlling debates' terms, a perspective in social histories. You observe Sokrates' commanding presence, wondering if it is liberty or leverage, and lean toward dominance. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a dialogue's intent over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the stoa to an extent. You learn to answer cautiously, endure the tunic's sticky cling, and keep your voice steady to avoid heckles. You pass the olive's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a column, earning a flutter, and refocus on Sokrates, who shows you how to frame a question without faltering. You are fumbling, your thoughts tangled, but his patient nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why philosophers' debates defined ancient Greece not mere talk, but a mental forge, testing Athenians' wits in every probing clash. You glance at a passing student, his cough cutting through the stoa's din, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its intellectual struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the stoa's dust fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Ariston's owl eye pendant vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the ruined speaker, Talia's rites, and all the Athenians sparring in those shaded stoas. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another debate's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating logic without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the stoa's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from the shaded stoa of Athens' agora, the dizzying sting of Sokrates' relentless questions still buzzing in your mind like a Subura rhetorician's barbs after a heated debate. Your linen tunic is damp with sweat from the intellectual fray, dusted with pebbles from the stoa's floor, your sandals worn from pacing under scrutiny. Ariston's owl eye pendant, a clay charm for wisdom, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your grapple with philosophers' endless debates. The air shifts from papyrus and olive oil to a warm, herb-scented breeze as you wander into a quiet Athenian neighborhood, its mud brick homes hushed under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life hides a stark divide. Women face strict constraints in a male-dominated world. You are drawn to an oikos, where a woman's daily life unfolds in confinement. Welcome to a world of women's restricted lives, where you experience the limits imposed on Athenian women. Fair warning, it is more stifling than a Subura matron's curfew, and navigating these constraints will test your spirit more than a Socratic spar. You step into the oikos, its courtyard shaded by a fig tree, the air thick with wool, olive oil, and the faint hum of a loom weaving in a corner. Mud brick walls enclose a small space, with a hearth smoldering under a clay pot of lentils. You are surrounded by the household women spinning wool, a slave grinding barley, and children playing with clay dolls, their voices soft to avoid male rebuke. Your tunic clings, your sandals scuff the dirt floor as you approach a woman named Calliope, her chiton neatly draped, her hands deftly spinning wool into thread. You notice her veiled head, a sign of modesty, and her guarded eyes, hinting at a life bound by custom and duty. You are here to experience the constraints on Greek women, a world of domestic confinement and social limits that stifles freedom, and you realize agency is a distant dream, heart quickening as you brace against the oikos' quiet oppression. You settle by the loom, the hearth's faint warmth barely easing the courtyard's chill, as Calliope hands you a spindle to try, her voice soft, "Spin, traveler, to share our work." You twirl the spindle, its weight awkward in your hands, and fumble the wool, its fibers tangling, unlike the agora's gritty bread. You note her steady hands, weaving with practiced grace, yet her posture is tense, as if mindful of unseen watchers. You are struck by the restrictions. Women's lives here are not mere routine but a cage, confined to the oikos, barred from public roles, and judged by modesty and obedience. You are tempted to ask about her freedom, but a child's hushed giggle over a dropped shuttle pulls your focus, and you wonder how women endure this stifling existence, your fingers fumbling as you clutch the spindle, seeking purpose in a task that feels more like a chain than a craft. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, women faced severe social and legal restrictions, confined to domestic roles with limited rights and public participation, as evidenced by ancient texts like Xenophon's Economicus and archaeological household remains. You observe Calliope now, her spindle twirling with quiet precision. Athenian women, especially citizens' wives and daughters, were expected to manage the oikos' spinning, weaving, cooking, and child-rearing while remaining secluded from public life. They could not vote, own property, or appear in court without a male guardian kyrios, and public spaces like the agora or assembly were male domains. These constraints, rooted in ideals of modesty, reinforced male dominance, with deviations risking shame or punishment, as seen during the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE when social norms tightened. You consider Calliope's veiled head, recognizing its symbolic weight, and you begin to admire her resilience, navigating confines with little more than wool and grit. You strive to blend in, but your tangled spindle elicits a gentle smile from a slave, who tosses you a small dried fig, murmuring, "Chew for steady hands." You bite the sweet fruit, grateful, and notice she wears a linen cord around her wrist, knotted with a small loom shuttle, perhaps a weaving charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian households, some women or slaves wore shuttle cords, linen straps with miniature loom shuttles or thread knots believed to ensure fine weaving or appease household gods, a practice found in domestic artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine the slave's cord, pondering whether it holds superstition or sisterhood, and it offers a quaint insight into how women sought meaning in their work, turning shuttles into talismans against confinement's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Calliope calls you to help wind thread, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to stretch your cramped legs. You begin to sense the oikos rhythm, a subdued pulse of labor and duty amid Athens' bustle. You overhear a woman lament a shamed sister scolded for unveiled outings, prompting hushed murmurs from the household. You catch Calliope's cautious glance, her hands never pausing, and it dawns on you restrictions not only limit actions but bind spirits, with scrutiny threading through every thread or whispered word. You recall Sokrates' Stoa debates, where words forged freedom, and recognize this oikos as a quieter stage, where women's constraints shape daily survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian women's restrictions primarily protect social order or suppress individual potential? Some scholars assert they preserved order, stabilizing families and society, as seen in legal texts. Others argue they suppressed potential, denying women education or agency, a perspective in gender studies. You observe Calliope's steady spindle, wondering if it is stability or stifling, and lean toward suppression. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a law's intent over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the oikos, to an extent. You learn to wind thread carefully, endure the tunic's sticky cling, and keep your spindle steady to avoid tangles. You pass the fig's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a rafter, earning a flutter, and refocus on Calliope, who shows you how to spin wool without breaking it. You are fumbling, your hands clumsy, but her patient nod steadies you, heart quickening. You begin to grasp why women's restrictions defined ancient Greece not mere custom, but a confining web, testing their resolve in every woven thread. You glance at a passing child, her cough cutting through the courtyard's hum, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its domestic struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the oikos wool fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, the slave's shuttle chord vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the shamed sister Sokrates debates, and all the women bound by duty in those quiet homes. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another constraint's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating limits without spilling thread or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the oikos pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You slip away from Calliope's quiet oikos, the rhythmic hum of her spindle still echoing in your ears like a Subura weaver's loom, fading into a hushed dusk. Your linen tunic is damp with courtyard heat, dusted with wool fibers from spinning thread, your sandals scuffed from the dirt floor. The slave's shuttle cord, a linen charm for fine weaving, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your experience with the constraints on Athenian women. The air shifts from wool and herbs to a heavier, sweat-soaked reek as you wander into Athens' bustling streets, their cobblestones alive with the clatter of carts under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life rests on a grim foundation slavery underpins its society, with brutal burdens shaping daily existence. You are drawn to a potter's workshop, where slaves toil under harsh conditions. Welcome to a world of slavery's brutal burden, where you witness the grueling realities of enslaved life. Fair warning, it is harsher than a Subura laborer's grind, and enduring this grim scene will test your heart more than a woman's domestic cage. You step into the potter's workshop, its mud brick walls blackened by kiln smoke, the air thick with clay dust, sweat, and the sharp tang of burning charcoal. Clay pots line shelves, some drying, others firing in a glowing kiln, while a potter's wheel spins under flickering rushlights. You are surrounded by workers' slaves in tattered tunics, their hands caked with clay, and a citizen overseer barking orders, his whip coiled at his belt. Your tunic clings, your sandals stick to the clay-smeared floor as you approach a slave named Theron, his shoulders hunched, shaping a vase on the wheel with calloused hands. You notice his gaunt frame, scarred from lash marks, and his weary eyes, reflecting a life of toil and fear. You are here to witness the harsh realities of slavery, a brutal system that strips freedom and dignity, and you realize survival is a daily ordeal, heart quickening as you brace against the workshop's oppressive heat. You stand near the wheel, the kill's heat searing your skin, as Theron molds the clay, his movements precise despite trembling fingers, striving to meet the overseer's quota. A fellow slave named Irene, her face smudged with ash, offers you a clay cup of tepid water, her voice barely audible. "Drink, traveler," to ease the dust. You sip the lukewarm liquid, its grit sharper than Calliope's fig, and note Irene's cracked hands, raw from hauling clay and stoking fires. You are struck by the brutality. Slavery here is not mere labor, but a relentless grind, with long hours, meager rations, and the ever-present threat of punishment shaping every task. You are tempted to ask about their rest, but a whip's crack as the overseer scolds a slow worker pulls your focus. And you wonder how slaves endure this cruel burden, your pulse racing as you clutch the cup, wary of drawing the overseer's glare. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, slavery was a cornerstone of society, with enslaved people performing labor in households, workshops, and mines, enduring harsh conditions and limited rights, as evidenced by ancient texts like Aristotle's Politics and archaeological slave quarters. You observe Theron now, his hands shaping the vase with grim focus. Slaves, often war captives, debtors, or born into servitude, numbered tens of thousands in Athens, comprising up to a third of the population. They worked as potters, farmers, miners, or domestics, with no legal protections, subject to beatings or sale. The Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE increased reliance on slaves as citizens fought, but escapes or revolts were rare due to strict control. You consider Theron's scarred back, recognizing its brutal mark, and you begin to admire the slave's endurance, toiling under oppression with little more than clay and grit. You strive to blend in, but your wince at the water's grit elicits a faint nod from Irene, who tosses you a small olive, murmuring, "Chew to still your nerves." You bite the bitter fruit, grateful, and notice she wears a leather cord around her neck, strung with a small clay bead shaped like a wheel, perhaps a labor charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian workshops, some slaves wore wheel beads, clay, or bone charms shaped like wheels or tools believed to ensure steady work or appease craft gods, a practice found in workshop artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Irene's bead, pondering whether it holds superstition or survival, and it offers a quaint insight into how slaves sought meaning in their toil, turning clay into talismans against labor's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Theron calls you to help carry clay, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe sweat from your brow. You begin to sense the workshop's rhythm, a grueling pulse of toil and tension amid Athens' heat. You overhear a slave mutter about a fled companion caught and punished, prompting hushed murmurs from workers. You catch Theron's guarded glance, his hands never pausing, and it dawns on you slavery not only breaks bodies but binds spirits, with fear threading through every vase or stoked fire. You recall Calliope's confined oikos, where women spun in silence, and recognize this workshop as a harsher stage, where slavery's brutal burden shapes survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian slavery primarily sustain economic prosperity or erode social ethics? Some scholars assert it fueled prosperity, enabling Athens' cultural and military achievements, as seen in economic studies. Others argue it eroded ethics, dehumanizing a third of the population, a perspective in ethical histories. You observe Theron's trembling hands, wondering if it is wealth or wickedness, and lean toward ethics. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a slave's price over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the workshop to an extent. You learn to carry clay carefully, endure the tunic's sweaty cling, and keep your pace steady to avoid the overseer's whip. You pass the olive's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a shelf, earning a flutter, and refocus on Theron, who shows you how to stack clay without dropping it. You are fumbling, your arms aching, but his quiet nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why slavery's burden defined ancient Greece, not mere labor, but a crushing weight, testing slaves' resolve in every molded vase. You glance at a passing slave, her cough cutting through the kill's roar, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its enslaved struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the workshop's clay fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Irene's will bead vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the fled companion, Calliope's spindle, and all the slaves toiling in those smoky workshops. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another labor's secrets. But you are more resilient than you thought, navigating oppression without spilling water or your cover. You head toward your rented room. The workshop's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You stagger away from Theron's clay-smeared potter's workshop, the oppressive heat of the kiln and the sting of Irene's tepid water still clinging to your skin like a Subura forges soot after a grueling shift. Your linen tunic is damp with sweat, streaked with clay from hauling pots, your sandals sticky from the workshop's gritty floor. Irene's wheel bead, a clay charm for steady labor, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your witness to slavery's brutal burden. The air shifts from charcoal and sweat to a warm, herb-scented breeze as you wander through Athens' narrow streets, their cobblestones bustling under a fading sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life hides a perilous truth. Medicine is primitive, and illness a gamble with fate. You are drawn to a physician's modest stall near the agora, where the sick seek crude remedies. Welcome to a world of medical misadventures, where you endure the unsettling practices of ancient Greek healing. Fair warning, it is dicier than a Subura healer's brew, and surviving these treatments will test your nerve more than a slave's toil. You step into the physician's stall, its canvas awning shading a wooden bench strewn with clay jars, bronze tools, and dried herbs, the air thick with vinegar, thyme, and the faint reek of sweat from anxious patients. A small brazier smolders, heating a pot of herbal broth, while scrolls of medical texts lie stacked nearby. You are surrounded by Athenians' patients in tattered tunics, a slave fanning the physician, and citizens murmuring prayers, their faces pale with worry. Your tunic clings, your sandals scuff the dirt floor as you approach the physician, a man named Hippocrates, his beard trim, his hands steady as he examines a coughing patient. You notice his linen robe, stained with herb juice, and his focused gaze, weighing symptoms with a frown. You are here to endure primitive Greek medical practices, a risky blend of herbs, prayers, and crude surgery, and you realize healing is as much hope as science, heart quickening as you brace against the stall's acrid air. You sit on the bench, the brazier's heat prickling your skin, as Hippocrates inspects your arm, probing a minor scrape from the workshop with a bronze probe, his touch firm but unsettling. A slave named Lysias, his tunic patched, offers you a clay cup of herbal decoction, his voice low, "Drink, traveler, to soothe your blood." You sip the bitter brew, its tang sharper than Theron's olive, and note Lysias' weary hands, raw from grinding herbs for endless patience. You are struck by the uncertainty. Medicine here is not cure, but conjecture, with treatments like poultices, purges, or bleedings often worsening ailments, guided by humoral theories rather than knowledge of infection. You are tempted to question the probe's cleanliness, but a patient's groan as Hippocrates applies a mustard plaster pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure these medical risks, your pulse racing as you clutch the cup, wary of the physician's next move. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Greece, particularly Athens in the 5th century BCE, medical practices were primitive, relying on humoral theory, herbal remedies, and basic surgery, with limited understanding of disease, as evidenced by the Hippocratic corpus and archaeological medical tools. You observe Hippocrates now, his probe tracing your scrape with practiced care. Physicians like Hippocrates balanced the Botus for humor's blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile using diets, purges, or bleedings, believing imbalance caused illness. Herbal decoctions, poultices, and bone setting were common, but without germ theory, infections from unsterile tools or wounds were rampant. During the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE, plagues decimated Athens, exposing medicine's limits, with treatments often failing against diseases like typhoid or smallpox. You consider the decoction's bitter dregs, recognizing its dubious aid, and you begin to admire the Athenians' fortitude, seeking health with little more than herbs and hope. You strive to blend in, But your wince at the brew elicits a faint nod from Lysias, who tosses you a small dried date, murmuring, "Chew to calm your spirit." You bite the sweet fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a linen cord around his wrist, knotted with a small bronze leaf, perhaps a healing charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian medical stalls, some slaves or assistants wore leaf cords, linen straps with bronze or clay leaves believed to aid healing or appease Asclepius, the healing god, a practice found in medical artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Lysias' cord, pondering whether it holds superstition or solace, and it offers a quaint insight into how healers sought divine aid, turning leaves into talismans against illness shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Hippocrates calls you to hold a patient's arm for bandaging, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to flinch at the patient's fevered skin. You begin to sense the stall's rhythm, a tense pulse of remedy and risk amid Athens' bustle. You overhear a citizen lament a failed purge that worsened his kin's fever, prompting hushed murmurs from patients. You catch Hippocrates' steady glance, his hands applying a poultice, and it dawns on you medicine not only treats bodies but tests faith, with uncertainty threading through every herb or bandage. You recall Calliope's confined oikos, where duty bound women, and recognize this stall as a riskier stage, where primitive practices shape survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did ancient Greek medicine primarily advance scientific inquiry or perpetuate harmful practices? Some scholars assert it laid scientific foundations, with Hippocratic observation influencing modern medicine, as seen in medical texts. Others argue it perpetuated harm, with unsterile tools and humoral errors causing suffering, a perspective in medical histories. You observe Hippocrates' bronze probe, wondering if it is progress or peril, and lean toward harm. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a treatment's intent over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the stall, to an extent. You learn to hold bandages steady, endure the tunic's sweaty itch, and keep your hands gentle to avoid patient pain. You pass the date's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a jar, earning a flutter, and refocus on Hippocrates, who shows you how to wrap wounds without tightening too much. You are fumbling, your hands shaky, but his curt nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why medical misadventures defined ancient Greece, not mere healing, but a gamble, testing Athenians' resolve in every bitter dose. You glance at a passing patient, his cough cutting through the stall's hum, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its healing struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the stall's herbs fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Lysias' leaf cord vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the failed purge, Calliope's spindle, and all the Athenians seeking cures in those smoky stalls. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another remedy's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating risk without spilling decoction or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the stall's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from Hippocrates' herb-scented medical stall, the bitter tang of Lysias' herbal decoction still burning your throat like a Subura apothecary's brew after a dubious cure. Your linen tunic is damp with sweat from the stall's heat, streaked with time from bandaging wounds. Your sandals gritty from the dirt floor. Lysias' leaf cord, a bronze charm for healing, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your endurance through primitive Greek medical practices. The air shifts from vinegar and herbs to a warm, dust-laden breeze as you wander toward Athens' Theater of Dionysus, its stone tiers gleaming under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' vibrant life pulses with theater, a cultural cornerstone laden with social expectations. You are drawn to the theater's bustling crowd, where citizens gather for a dramatic festival. Welcome to a world of theater's social stakes, where you navigate the pressures of Greek performance and audience judgment. Fair warning, it is more intense than a Subura barred street show, and surviving these dramatic pressures will test your nerve more than a physician's probe. You step into the theater of Dionysus. Its semicircular stone bench is packed with thousands, the air thick with wine, olive oil, and the faint hum of excited chatter echoing off marble. Wooden stage props loom below, painted with scenes of gods and heroes, while actors rehearse under a canvas awning. You are surrounded by Athenian citizens in draped hemations, women seated separately, and slaves serving wine, their faces flushed with anticipation or critique. Your tunic clings, your sandals scuff the stone steps as you squeeze onto a bench near a citizen named Cleon, his beard flecked with crumbs, shouting opinions about the play's poet. You notice his animated gestures, waving a wine cup, and his sharp eyes, judging every actor's line. You are here to navigate the social stakes of Greek theater, a public arena where performance reflects civic pride and personal reputation, and you realize a misjudged reaction could mark you as uncultured, heart-quickening as you brace for the play's opening chorus. You settle on the bench, the stone warm from the sun, as the chorus enters, their masked faces chanting a hymn to Dionysus, their voices rising over the crowd's murmurs. Cleon leans close, offering you a clay cup of diluted wine, his voice boisterous. "Drink, traveler, to honor the drama." You sip the tart brew, its bite sharper than Hippocrates' decoction, and note his eager grin, urging you to cheer or jeer with the crowd. You are struck by the pressure theater here is not mere entertainment, but a social crucible, where audience reactions shape poets' fame and civic identity, and a wrong clap could earn scorn or suspicion. You are tempted to stay silent, but a citizen's shout at a flubbed line pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure this dramatic scrutiny, your pulse racing as you clutch the cup, wary of misjudging the play's tone. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, theater was a central cultural and civic institution, with festivals like the Dionysia showcasing tragedies and comedies that reflected social and political themes, as evidenced by ancient texts like Aristophanes' plays and archaeological theater remains. You observe Cleon now, his cup raised as he cheers a chorus verse. The theater of Dionysus hosted annual festivals, drawing thousands to watch works by poets like Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. Plays, funded by wealthy citizens' chorigoi, explored morality, war, and democracy, serving as public discourse during the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BC. Audiences judged performances fiercely, with prizes awarded by vote, and poets or actors risked ridicule or exile for failure. You consider the chorus masked dance, recognizing its civic weight, and you begin to admire the Athenians' passion, engaging with drama despite its high stakes. You strive to blend in, but your hesitant clap elicits a playful nudge from Cleon, who tosses you a small olive, murmuring, "Chew to join the fray." You bite the bitter fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a clay pendant shaped like a tragic mask, perhaps a theater charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian theater festivals, some spectators wore mask pendants, clay or bronze charms depicting tragic or comic masks believed to enhance appreciation or ward off actors' curses, a practice found in theater artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Cleon's pendant, pondering whether it holds superstition or spectacle pride, and it offers a quaint insight into how Athenians embrace theater's magic, turning clay into talismans of drama's power. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Cleon calls you to join a cheer for the lead actor, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to shield your ears from the crowd's roar. You begin to sense the theater's rhythm, a fervent pulse of applause and critique amid Athens' heat. You overhear a citizen lament a failed poet booed off last year's stage, prompting hushed murmurs from the crowd. You catch Cleon's boisterous glance, his voice urging you to jeer a weak line, and it dawns on you theater not only entertains, but exposes, with judgment threading through every chant or actor's pause. You recall Hippocrates' medical stall, where remedies tested hope, and recognize this theater as a louder stage, where social stakes shape Athenian life. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian theater primarily serve as civic education or social control? Some scholars assert it educated, fostering reflection on democracy and ethics, as seen in tragic themes. Others argue it controlled, reinforcing norms through satire or tragedy, a perspective in cultural studies. You observe Cleon's fervent cheer, wondering if it is learning or leash, and lean toward control. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a play's message over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the theater, to an extent. You learn to cheer cautiously, endure the tunic's sticky cling, and keep your voice loud to blend with the crowd. You pass the olives pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a bench, earning a flutter, and refocus on Cleon, who shows you how to time applause for maximum effect. You are fumbling, your claps offbeat, but his hearty nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why theater's stakes defined ancient Greece, not mere drama, but a public trial, testing Athenians' resolve in every shouted critique. You glance at a passing spectator, his cough cutting through the chorus chant, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its dramatic struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the theater's din fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Cleon's mask pendant vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the failed poet, Hippocrates' cures, and all the Athenians judging plays in those stone tears. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another performance's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating scrutiny without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the theater's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from the theater of Dionysus, the raucous echo of Cleon's boisterous cheers still ringing in your ears like a Subura crowd's clamor after a bard's tale. Your linen tunic is damp with sweat from the theater's packed benches, dusted with olive pits from shared snacks, your sandals scuffed from stone steps. Cleon's mask pendant, a clay charm for dramatic favor, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your navigation through the social stakes of Greek theater. The air shifts from wine and dust to a briny, fish-scented breeze as you wander toward Athens' port of Piraeus, its docks alive with ships under a twilight sky. It is 430 BCE, and Greece's maritime life demands courage, with treacherous voyages shaping trade and survival. You are drawn to a trireme preparing for a trade journey to Corinth. Welcome to a world of seafaring's perilous voyages, where you brave the dangers of Greek sea travel. Fair warning, it is stormier than a Subura sailor's yarn, and surviving these waves will test your mettle more than a theater's jeers. You step onto the bustling dock, its wooden planks slick with seawater, the air thick with tar, fish, and the creak of ropes securing ships to stone bollards. Triremes and merchant vessels bob in the harbor, their sails furled or stacked, while gulls wheel overhead. You are surrounded by mariners, sailors in short tunics, merchants checking cargo, and slaves hauling amphorae, their faces weathered by sun and spray. Your tunic clings, your sandals slip on wet wood as you board a trireme under the command of a captain named Nicias, his beard salt-crusted, barking orders to rowers. You notice his calloused hands, gripping a steering oar, and his sharp eyes, scanning the horizon for storm clouds. You are here to brave the perils of Greek sea journeys, a high-stakes venture fraught with storms, pirates, and shipwrecks, and you realize survival is a fragile hope, heart quickening as you brace against the ship's rocking deck. You settle on a rower's bench, the wood rough under your thighs, as Nicias signals the crew to cast off, the trireme gliding into the Saronic Gulf's choppy waters. A sailor named Theron, his arms scarred from hauling ropes, offers you a clay flask of watered wine, his voice gruff, "Drink, traveler," to steady your gut. You sip the sour brew, its tang sharper than Cleon's theater wine, and note Theron's tense posture, eyeing the darkening sky for signs of trouble. You are struck by the danger seafaring here is not mere travel but a gamble, with unpredictable winds, hidden reefs, and pirate threats testing every stroke. You are tempted to ask about storms, but a rower's grunt as waves slap the hull pulls your focus, and you wonder how mariners endure these treacherous voyages, your stomach lurching as you clutch the flask, wary of the sea's restless churn. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Greece, particularly in the 5th century BCE, seafaring was a vital yet perilous activity, with triremes and merchant ships facing storms, pirates, and navigational challenges to sustain trade and warfare, as evidenced by ancient texts like Thucydides' histories and archaeological shipwrecks. You observe Nicias now, his hands steady on the steering or as he navigates the Gulf. Athens' maritime power relied on its navy and trade routes, connecting ports like Piraeus to colonies and allies. Triremes, powered by 170 rowers, were fast but vulnerable to weather, while merchant ships carried wine, oil, and grain, risking shipwrecks on rocky coasts. During the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE, naval battles and piracy surged, amplifying dangers. You consider the trireme's creaking hull, recognizing its fragile strength, and you begin to admire the mariner's courage, braving waves with little more than oars and grit. You strive to blend in, but your clumsy grip on an oar elicits a wry grunt from Theron, who tosses you a small dried fish, murmuring, "Chew to brace your arms." You bite the salty morsel, grateful, and notice he wears a leather cord around his neck, strung with a small bronze anchor, perhaps a seafaring charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Greek ports, some sailors wore anchor cords, leather straps with bronze or bone anchors believed to ensure safe voyages or appease Poseidon, a practice found in maritime artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Theron's cord, pondering whether it holds superstition or sailor's pride, and it offers a quaint insight into how mariners sought protection on perilous seas, turning bronze into talismans against storm's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Nicias barks for you to row harder, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe spray from your face. You begin to sense the trireme's rhythm, a grueling pulse of oars and waves amid the sea's roar. You overhear a rower mutter about a lost ship wrecked on Chios reefs last year, prompting hushed murmurs from the crew. You catch Nicias' tense glance, his voice urging faster strokes, and it dawns on you seafaring not only risks lives but binds fates, with danger threading through every wave or creaking plank. You recall Cleon's theater cheers, where applause shaped fame, and recognize this trireme as a deadlier stage, where perilous voyages shape survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Greek seafaring primarily drive economic prosperity or exacerbate social risks? Some scholars assert it fueled prosperity, enabling trade and naval dominance, as seen in economic records. Others argue it heightened risks, with losses from storms and piracy straining communities, a perspective in maritime histories. You observe Nicias steady or wondering if it is wealth or wager, and lean toward risks. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a ship's cargo over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the trireme, to an extent. You learn to row in sync, endure the tunic's salty cling, and keep your strokes steady to avoid Nicias' glare. You toss the fish's bones into the sea, sparing no sparrow on these waves, and refocus on Theron, who shows you how to brace against the oar's pull. You are fumbling, your arms aching, but his gruff nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why seafaring's perils defined ancient Greece, not mere travel, but a high-stakes trial, testing mariners' resolve in every crashing wave. You glance at a passing rower, his cough muffled by the wind's howl, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its maritime struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the trireme's spray fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Theron's anchor cord vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut, where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the lost ship, Cleon's theater, and all the mariners braving seas in those creaking hulls. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another voyage's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating waves without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room. The triremes pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You stagger away from the triremes' rocking deck, the salty sting of Theron's watered wine still churning in your gut like a Subura sailor's grog after a stormy night. Your linen tunic is stiff with sea spray, streaked with tar from hauling ropes, your sandals sodden from Piraeus' slick docks. Theron's anchor cord, a bronze charm for safe voyages, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your perilous seafaring journey. The air shifts from briny fish to a dusty, metallic tang as you return to Athens, its streets tense with the clamor of war preparations under a dawn sky. It is 430 BCE, and the Peloponnesian War grips Athens, demanding every citizen's service in a relentless call to arms. You are drawn to a training ground where hoplites drill for battle. Welcome to a world of war's relentless call, where you face the grueling demands of Greek warfare. Fair warning, it is fiercer than a Subura street brawl, and surviving these martial trials will test your courage more than a trireme's waves. You step onto the training ground, a dusty plain outside Athens' walls, where olive groves frame a field churned by marching boots, the air thick with sweat, bronze, and the sharp clank of shields clashing. Hoplites in formation practice thrusts with spears, their helmets gleaming under a rising sun. You are surrounded by Athenian citizens in heavy armor, slaves hauling water, and officers shouting commands, their faces stern with purpose. Your tunic clings, your sandals sink into dust as you join a group led by a strategos named Cleon, his breastplate scarred, his voice a whip driving recruits to form a phalanx. You notice his grieved legs, straining under armor's weight, and his piercing gaze, sizing you up as a novice unfit for battle. You are here to face the demands of Greek warfare, a brutal regimen of discipline and endurance that defines Athens' survival, and you realize failure could mean death or disgrace, heart quickening as you brace for Cleon's orders. You stand in the phalanx, the bronze shield heavy on your arm, as Cleon barks for a shield wall push, his spear jabbing to correct your stance. A slave named Lysias, his tunic ragged, offers you a clay flask of diluted wine, his voice low, "Drink, traveler," to brace your strength. You sip the sour brew, its bite sharper than Theron's sea wine, and note Lysias' bruised arms, worn from carrying shields for warriors. You are struck by the intensity. Warfare here is not mere combat, but a crucible, forging citizens into hoplites through relentless drills, where a weak thrust could unravel the line. You are tempted to protest the shield's weight, but a recruit's grunt as he falters pulls your focus, and you wonder how Athenians endure this martial grind, your muscles aching as you clutch the flask, wary of Cleon's relentless scrutiny. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, warfare was a central duty for male citizens, who served as hoplites in phalanx formations during conflicts like the Peloponnesian War, requiring rigorous training and sacrifice, as evidenced by ancient texts like Thucydides' histories and archaeological armor finds. You observe Cleon now, his spear raised as he drills the phalanx. Athenian citizens, aged 18 to 60, were liable for military service, training as hoplites equipped with bronze armor, shields, and spears. The phalanx, a tight formation of spearmen, relied on discipline and cohesion, crucial against Sparta's forces. War disrupted lives, with campaigns lasting months, and losses especially during the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE devastated families. You consider the shield's crushing weight, recognizing its martial necessity, and you begin to admire the Athenians' resolve, facing battle with little more than bronze and grit. You strive to blend in, but your shaky stance elicits a curt nod from Lysias, who tosses you a small dried fig, murmuring, "Chew to steal your nerve." You bite the sweet fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a leather cord around his neck, strung with a small bronze spearhead, perhaps a warrior charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian training grounds, some slaves or assistants wore spear cords leather straps with bronze or bone spearheads believed to protect warriors or appease Ares, a practice found in military artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Lysias' cord, pondering whether it holds superstition or servitude, and it offers a quaint insight into how even slaves sought meaning in war's grind, turning bronze into talismans against battle's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Cleon barks for you to thrust your spear, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe dust from your eyes. You begin to sense the ground's rhythm, a punishing pulse of clash and command amid Athens' dust. You overhear a recruit mutter about a fallen comrade lost in last year's skirmish, prompting hushed murmurs from the phalanx. You catch Cleon's stern glance, his voice driving the line forward, and it dawns on you warfare not only tests bodies but binds fates, with fear threading through every thrust or shield's clang. You recall Cleon's theater cheers, where applause shaped fame, and recognize this training ground as a deadlier stage, where war's demands shape survival. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian warfare primarily strengthen civic unity or deepen social divides? Some scholars assert it unified citizens, fostering solidarity through shared duty, as seen in battle accounts. Others argue it deepened divides, with wealthier citizens affording better armor, a perspective in social histories. You observe Cleon's scarred breastplate, wondering if it is unity or unequal, and lean toward divides. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a phalanx's formation over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the phalanx, to an extent. You learn to thrust steadily, endure the tunic's sweaty cling, and keep your shield locked to avoid Cleon's wrath. You pass the fig's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a rock, earning a flutter, and refocus on Cleon, who shows you how to brace against a push without buckling. You are fumbling, your arms trembling, but his gruff nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why wars called defined ancient Greece not mere combat, but a relentless trial, testing Athenians' resolve in every clashing spear. You glance at a passing slave, his cough cutting through the dust's din, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its warrior struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the training ground's dust fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Lysias' spear cord vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the fallen comrade, Cleon's theater, and all the Athenians drilling for war in those dusty plains. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another battle's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating rigor without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room. The phalanxes pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You stagger away from Athens' dusty training ground, the crushing weight of Cleon's bronze shield still aching in your arms like a Subura blacksmith's hammer after a long day's forge. Your linen tunic is stiff with sweat and dust from phalanx drills, your sandals gritty from churned earth. Lysias' spear cord, a bronze charm for warrior strength, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your grueling encounter with war's relentless call. The air shifts from bronze and sweat to a warm, papyrus-scented breeze as you wander back into Athens' quiet streets, their cobblestones hushed under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' intellectual life demands not only warriors but scholars, with education a rigorous path for its youth. You are drawn to a small schoolroom in a citizen's oikos, where boys face strict lessons. Welcome to a world of education's rigorous path, where you tackle the challenges of Greek schooling. Fair warning, it is tougher than a Subura tutor's cane, and surviving these lessons will test your mind more than a hoplite spear. You step into the oikos schoolroom, its mud brick walls lined with wooden benches, the air thick with wax, ink, and the faint scratch of styluses on tablets. A single window lets in slanted sunlight, illuminating a scroll of Homer's Iliad pinned to the wall. You are surrounded by young Athenians, boys in short tunics, their heads bent over tablets, and a slave pedagogue watching, his eyes sharp for errors. Your tunic clings, your sandals creak on the dirt floor as you settle on a bench beside a teacher named Ariston, his hematon neat, reciting poetry with a stern cadence. You notice his wooden rod, poised for discipline, and his weary frown, hinting at the effort to mold unruly minds. You are here to tackle the challenges of Greek schooling, a demanding regimen of reading, writing, and recitation that shapes Athens' future, and you realize failure could mean shame or a stinging correction, heart quickening as you brace for Ariston's piercing gaze. You grip a wax tablet, the stylus awkward in your hand, as Ariston orders you to copy a line from Homer, his voice sharp. Write, traveler, and prove your worth. You scratch the stylus, its point slipping, and smudge the wax, unlike the trireme's salty ore. A student named Theron, his tablet neat, offers you a clay cup of watered wine, his voice soft. Drink, friend, to steady your hand. You sip the tart brew, its bite sharper than Cleon's war wine, and note Theron's nervous glance, wary of Ariston's rod. You are struck by the rigor schooling here is not mere learning but a trial, with long hours, strict discipline, and high expectations forging boys into citizens, where a wrong letter could earn a lash or scorn. You are tempted to protest the task, but a boy's yelp as Ariston corrects his posture pulls your focus, and you wonder how students endure this academic grind, your fingers trembling as you clutch the stylus, seeking focus in a lesson that feels more like a battle than a book. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, education for male citizens was rigorous, focusing on reading, writing, music, and physical training to prepare boys for civic and military roles, as evidenced by ancient texts like Plato's Protagoras and archaeological school artifacts. You observe Ariston now, his rod tapping as he recites Homer. Boys, typically aged 7 to 14, attended private schools or tutors, learning to read and write using wax tablets and scrolls, memorizing epic poetry, and practicing lyre playing. Physical training, like wrestling, built strength for hoplite service, while discipline, often corporal, ensured obedience. Education was a privilege, excluding girls and slaves, and vital during the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE to sustain Athens' democracy. You consider the tablet's waxy lines, recognizing their civic weight, and you begin to admire the student's perseverance, mastering lessons with little more than wax and grit. You strive to blend in, but your smudged tablet elicits a faint tisque from Theron, who tosses you a small olive, murmuring, "Chew to clear your mind." You bite the bitter fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a clay pendant shaped like a lyre, perhaps a learning charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian schoolrooms, some students wore lyre pendants, clay or bronze charms depicting lyres or scrolls believed to sharpen memory or honor the muses, a practice found in educational artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Theron's pendant, pondering whether it holds superstition or scholarly pride, and it offers a quaint insight into how students sought success in their studies, turning clay into talismans against ignorance's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Ariston calls you to recite a verse, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to rub your aching wrist. You begin to sense the schoolroom's rhythm, a stern pulse of recitation and correction amid Athens' heat. You overhear a boy lament a failed verse punished with extra lines, prompting hushed murmurs from his peers. You catch Ariston's unyielding glance, his voice demanding flawless delivery, and it dawns on you education not only shapes minds but binds futures, with discipline threading through every letter or lyre note. You recall Cleon's phalanx drills, where spears forged warriors, and recognize this schoolroom as a quieter stage, where rigorous lessons shape Athenian life. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian education primarily foster civic virtue or reinforce social exclusion? Some scholars assert it built virtue, preparing boys for democracy and duty, as seen in philosophical texts. Others argue it excluded, limiting learning to elite males, a perspective in social histories. You observe Ariston's rod, wondering if it is virtue or barrier, and lean toward exclusion. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a curriculum's aim over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the schoolroom, to an extent. You learn to recite carefully, endure the tunic's sweaty cling, and keep your stylus steady to avoid smudges. You pass the olive's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a windowsill, earning a flutter, and refocus on Ariston, who shows you how to form letters without wavering. You are fumbling, your voice shaky, but his curt nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why education's path defined ancient Greece not mere lessons, but a grueling forge, testing students' resolve in every scratched line. You glance at a passing boy, his cough cutting through the room's hum, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its scholarly struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the schoolroom's wax fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Theron's lyre pendant vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the failed verse, Cleon's phalanx, and all the boys studying in those stern oikoi. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another lesson's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating rigor without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room, the schoolroom's pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from Ariston's stern schoolroom, the scratchy strain of Homer's verses still echoing in your mind like a Subura tutor's drone after a long recitation. Your linen tunic is crisp with dried sweat from the oikos heat, dusted with wax flakes from your tablet, your sandals frayed from the dirt floor. Theron's lyre pendant, a clay charm for scholarly success, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your struggle through Athens' rigorous education. The air shifts from ink and papyrus to a warm, dust-charged breeze as you wander into Athens' agora, its cobblestones alive with the tense murmur of a gathering crowd under a late afternoon sun. It is 430 BCE, and Athens' democratic life hinges on a harsh legal system, where justice is swift and unforgiving. You are drawn to a public court in the agora, where citizens face trial before a jury. Welcome to a world of justice's stark judgments, where you encounter the unyielding demands of the Greek legal system. Fair warning, it is sharper than a Subura magistrate's gavel, and navigating this judicial ordeal will test your nerve more than a schoolboy's verse. You step into the court square, its open space ringed by stone benches and wooden platforms, the air thick with olive oil, sweat, and the faint hum of jurors' murmurs rising over a central podium. A marble stele lists laws, while a water clock drips, timing speeches. You are surrounded by Athenian citizens in draped hemations, jurors shouting opinions, and accused men standing nervously, their faces taut with fear. Your tunic clings, your sandals scuff the cobblestones as you squeeze onto a bench beside a citizen named Cleon, his beard gray, his voice loud as he debates the accused's guilt. You notice his knotted fingers, gripping a voting pebble, and his keen eyes, judging you as a newcomer to the trial's drama. You are here to encounter the unforgiving Greek legal system, a democratic yet brutal process where verdicts shape lives and honor, and you realize a single misjudgment could spell exile or worse, heart quickening as you brace for the court's heated clash. You settle on the bench, the stone warm from the sun, as a defendant pleads his case, accused of theft, his voice trembling as he faces a jury of 500 citizens. Cleon leans close, offering you a clay cup of watered wine, his voice gruff, "Drink, traveler," to steady your judgment. You sip the tart brew, its bite sharper than Ariston's school wine, and note Cleon's eager nod, urging you to weigh in on the case with a shout or gesture. You are struck by the severity. Justice here is not mere law but a public spectacle, with jurors' votes deciding fates through pebbles cast into urns, where a guilty verdict could mean fines, exile, or death. You are tempted to stay silent, but a juror's jeer at the defendant's weak defense pulls your focus. and you wonder how Athenians endure this judicial crucible, your pulse racing as you clutch the cup, wary of misreading the crowd's mood. Here is the principal historical fact. In ancient Athens, particularly in the 5th century BCE, the legal system was a cornerstone of democracy, with citizen juries deciding cases in public courts, delivering swift and often harsh verdicts, as evidenced by ancient texts like Aristophanes' wasps and archaeological court remains. You observe Cleon now, his pebble raised as he votes on the case. Athenian courts, held in the agora or heliastic courts, involved juries of hundreds, selected by lot, hearing cases of theft, treason, or impiety. Litigants argued their own cases, with no professional lawyers, and verdicts were final, ranging from fines to execution by hemlock, as seen in Sokrates' trial 399 BCE. During the Peloponnesian War 431–404 BCE, courts grew harsher, reflecting social tensions. You consider the defendant's trembling plea, recognizing its desperate weight, and you begin to admire the Athenians' commitment to justice, facing trials with little more than words and grit. You strive to blend in, but your hesitant nod at a juror's shout elicits a wry glance from Cleon, who tosses you a small dried olive, murmuring, "Chew to sharpen your vote." You bite the bitter fruit, grateful, and notice he wears a clay pendant shaped like a voting urn, perhaps a justice charm. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian courts, some jurors wore urn pendants, clay or bronze charms depicting voting urns or pebbles believed to ensure fair judgment or honor Dike, goddess of justice, a practice found in agora artifacts but seldom in written records. You examine Cleon's pendant, pondering whether it holds superstition or civic pride, and it offers a quaint insight into how jurors sought clarity in trials, turning clay into talismans against error's shadow. You are inclined to inquire about it, but Cleon calls you to join a vote with a raised hand, and you focus on the task, suppressing your urge to wipe dust from your eyes. You begin to sense the court's rhythm, a volatile pulse of argument and verdict amid Athens' heat. You overhear a citizen lament a banished kin exiled for a minor debt, prompting hushed murmurs from the jury. You catch Cleon's fervent glance, his voice urging you to shout your verdict, and it dawns on you justice not only resolves disputes but binds fates, with judgment threading through every pebble or juror's cry. You recall Ariston's schoolroom lessons, where verses shaped minds, and recognize this court as a fiercer stage, where harsh judgments shape Athenian life. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Did Athenian courts primarily uphold democratic fairness or enable mob rule? Some scholars assert they ensured fairness, empowering citizens through jury trials, as seen in legal inscriptions. Others argue they enabled mob rule, with emotional crowds swaying verdicts, a perspective in political histories. You observe Cleon's raised pebble, wondering if it is fairness or frenzy, and lean toward mob rule. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a trial's outcome over conceding both factors' roles. You adapt to the court to an extent. You learn to shout verdicts cautiously, endure the tunic's sweaty cling, and keep your hand steady to match the jury's mood. You pass the olive's pit to a scrawny sparrow perched on a steel, earning a flutter, and refocus on Cleon, who shows you how to cast a pebble without faltering. You are fumbling, your voice wavering, but his hearty nod steadies you, heart racing. You begin to grasp why justice's judgments defined ancient Greece, not mere law but a public crucible, testing Athenians' resolve in every cast vote. You glance at a passing juror, his cough cutting through the crowd's din, and breathe cautiously, the Subura's torchlight calling you back. Athens' trials deepen, but you are hooked on its judicial struggle. You return to the Subura's lanes, the court's dust fading, the stars bright above the roofs. Your heart races, Cleon's urn pendant vivid in your mind, the amulet and charcoal stick heavy in your pocket. You pass a hut where a woman weaves by firelight, and you are tempted to linger, but your legs ache. You think of the banished kin, Ariston's lessons, and all the Athenians judging in those crowded courts. You are uncertain how you will endure another day here, let alone another verdict's secrets, but you are more resilient than you thought, navigating justice without spilling wine or your cover. You head toward your rented room, The courts pulse faint under the night, ready for the next chapter in this Greek-riddled tale, eager to unravel more of its tangled woes. You shuffle away from the agora's tense court square, the sharp weight of Cleon's voting pebble still heavy in your palm, like a Subura magistrate's seal after a heated verdict. Your linen tunic is crisp with dust from the jury benches, streaked with sweat from shouting judgments. Your sandals worn from cobblestone steps. Cleon's urn pendant, a clay charm for just verdicts, lingers in your memory, alongside the clay hand amulet, charcoal stick, and paint-stained rags tucked in your pocket, each a relic of your encounter with Athens' unforgiving legal system. The air remains warm, laced with olive oil and the faint hum of evening lamps, as you settle on a stone bench overlooking the Acropolis, its marble temples glowing under a starry sky. It is 430 BCE, and Athens trials from markets to wars forge lessons that echo beyond the polis. You are here to reflect on the enduring legacy of ancient Greece's harsh realities, a tapestry of resilience and innovation that shapes modern life. Fair warning, it is deeper than a Subura philosopher's musings, but pondering these lessons will warm your heart more than a quartz pebble. You lean back, the bench cool beneath you, the city's pulse softening as Athens sleeps, its agora dim under starlight. You have braved Greece's gauntlet, Cleon's chaotic agora, Leonidas' Spartan drills, Lyssandra's sparse meals, Chloe's grimy fountain, Talia's sacred rites, Sokrates' probing debates, Calliope's confined oikos, Theron's enslaved toil, Hippocrates' crude cures, Dionysus' theatrical stakes, Nicias' stormy seas, Cleon's war drills, Ariston's stern lessons, and the court's harsh verdicts. Each trial from hunger to justice reveals a world where survival demanded grit, wit, and sacrifice, yet Athenians carved enduring legacies from their struggles. You are struck by the impact. Greece's hardships not only shaped its polis but seeded modern democracy, philosophy, and culture, from voting urns to tragic stages. You think of Theron's lyre pendant, Calliope's shuttle cord, and the Subura's distant glow, realizing these lessons are timeless, heart as a bridge to today's freedoms. You are ready to weave their lasting legacy, a tale that resonates beyond Athens' walls. You shift, the amulet heavy in your pocket, and picture the Greeks you have met. Chloe's scrubbing rag, Sokrates' piercing gaze, Nicias' steering oar, each a thread in a saga of endurance. These were not mere struggles, they were foundations, binding ancient Athens to modern lives through shared quests for justice, knowledge, and survival. You hold the charcoal stick, its tip blunt from sketching your journey, and marvel at the lessons reach how agora debates shaped parliaments, how theater birthed drama, how hoplite phalanxes inspired unity. You see Greek grit in today's courts, classrooms, and ships, from democratic votes to philosophical inquiries. You feel the weight of Greece's legacy, not just its trials, but its permanence, a beacon whispering resilience from marble stoas to modern halls. Here is the principal historical fact. Ancient Greece, particularly Athens in the 5th century BCE, profoundly influenced Western civilization through its innovations in democracy, philosophy, theater, and science, enduring despite its harsh realities, as evidenced by ancient texts like Plato's Republic and archaeological polis remains. You trace the stick's grain, pondering the legacy's scope. Athens' democratic courts and assemblies laid roots for modern governance, while philosophers like Socrates and Plato shaped ethical and scientific thought. Theater, from Sophocles to Aristophanes, birthed narrative arts, and maritime trade fueled cultural exchange, despite the Peloponnesian War's toll 431–404 BCE. Greece's trials slavery, inequality, war tested its genius, yet its ideas endure in today's laws, plays, and inquiries. You consider Cleon's voting pebble, recognizing its echo in ballots, and you admire the Greeks' vision, forging progress with little more than words and grit. You reflect further, recalling a moment in Cleon's court, his fervent vote for justice, mirrored in a modern citizen's ballot, both bound by civic duty. This introduces our curious historical detail. In certain Athenian courts, Some jurors exchanged vote knots linen cords tied, with specific patterns after trials believed to seal just verdicts for future fairness, a practice found in agora artifacts but seldom in texts. You picture Cleon's urn pendant, wondering if he tied such a knot, and it offers a quaint insight into how Greeks preserved justice's spirit, turning cords into symbols of enduring fairness. It is a clever nod, showing how lessons were woven to outlast Athens, waiting for new hands to untie them. You are tempted to sketch a knot, but your stick is spent, and the Subura's dawn calls you back. You sense the depth of Greece's lessons, not just their trials, but their permanence, like a steel carved in time. You think of Calliope's confined loom, Theron's enslaved wheel, and all the Greeks whose struggles shaped a freer world: merchants, philosophers, warriors, jurors. These hardships were not just for their day, they were for us, whispering resilience through agora stalls, trireme oars, and modern votes, from Tang scrolls to today's ideals. This leads to a matter historians continue to debate. Does ancient Greece's legacy primarily reflect cultural innovation or social resilience? Some scholars assert it showcases innovation, with democracy and philosophy transforming societies, as seen in classical texts. Others argue it reflects resilience, with Greeks enduring war and inequality to create a view in social histories. You hold the amulet, its clay a link to Chloe's fountain, and lean toward resilience. Yet, consensus eludes, as scholars prefer to dispute a law's origin over conceding both factors' roles. You stand, stretching your weary legs, and step toward the Acropolis, its temples casting soft shadows. You think of Sokrates' debates, Nicias' voyages, and all the trials that forged Greece's lessons. You have survived a journey barely through markets, wars, and courts, each peril a testament to Greek grit and genius. You are uncertain how they endured grimy wells or phalanx clashes, but you are tougher than you thought, carrying their legacy in your inky hands and heavy heart. You are ready to leave this Subura, but for now, you linger, Athens' pulse syncing with yours, Greece's lessons a quiet hum under the stars. You stand by the Acropolis, the Subura's dawn soft as a whisper, its mist curling like smoke from an Athenian hearth. The Arno hums, a lullaby older than temples, carrying away Athens' echoes, Cleon's bread, Calliope's loom, Nicias' oars. Your amulet rests heavy in your hand, a small anchor to a world that endured, its clay smoothed by timeless trials. Athens sleeps, its marbles warm under stars, and you feel Greek hopes, gentle as moonlight, blending into dreams where agorae thrive and phalanxes stand. Your breath slows, matching the city's quiet pulse, and you imagine drifting on the Arno, a reed boat rocking you toward slumber. Let Athens hold you, its lessons soft as starlight, its struggles warm as embers. Sleep now, carried by resilience that endures, gentle as a sigh, eternal as the night.